Joining us now on the phone is Acting Deputy Secretary of the Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli. Ken, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good to be with you this morning.
So the person who committed this crime on London Bridge, killed two people, was part of an al-Qaeda-inspired plot to blow up the London Stock Exchange, goes to prison in 2012, comes out in 2018 under what they say subject to conditions, I'm told, including an ankle bracelet. I mean, there's a cautionary tale here for all, isn't there?
Well, of course there is, and you heard the Prime Minister speaking about getting tougher, frankly, and that's something we'd like to see. People in our country don't necessarily see how much, I don't want to say soft, but how much milder the sentences for the same sorts of terrorism type of behavior they get in Europe. And here this guy comes out, and you look at what inspires somebody like this. Prison isn't going to rehabilitate him, and out he comes and commits more terrorism. We are very encouraged to hear our British partners speaking in terms of getting tougher on this front. We, of course, the U.S. government, offered our services and support as soon as this particular terrorist event happened. We're close allies. And let's not forget, I mean, you all are the news organization, this is happening less than 2 weeks before they have an election. So there could be quite a bit of public uproar beyond just from the terrorist attack, but related to any of the discussion related to the election.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in my mind, it seems like it would help with the re-election efforts of Boris Johnson. That remains to be seen. But again, there's sort of a progressive push when it comes to all of these sort of things, and there's a sense of unfairness in the way some people are treated, particularly immigrants, and in this particular case. So what is it that you take away? Because you are always on the front line of this stuff as Secretary of Homeland Defense, and you put up positions that are met with tremendous opposition in this country all the time.
Well, look, President Trump has been very aggressive with respect to illegal immigration. We have dramatically strengthened our vetting of everyone coming to this country. There are people who object to that on the left very strenuously, and yet this kind of incident is exactly what we're trying to avoid in this country. We can never avoid 100% of them, but the kind of defense that this president has put in place, unlike his predecessor, who was frankly inviting people in, for instance, massive numbers of Syrian refugees and so forth that were unvetted by relative standards of this administration, that's a great danger to the United States and to the people of this country. And that's not something President Trump has ever been willing to tolerate from the very beginning of taking his oath of office.
Right.
And if executing that policy annoys some people, well, that's what elections are about. I make no apologies for the president's, frankly, very successful immigration and vetting and Homeland Security policy.
Well, speaking of tolerance and apologies, I want to switch gears real quick and ask you about what happened between you and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley earlier this week. Now, there are reports that stated he shouted at you at a public event the night before Thanksgiving, and you left the venue. So what was it all about?
Oh, I didn't leave anywhere. This was at the Dubliner, an Irish pub near Gonzaga High School, where both he and I attended at different times. And the night before Thanksgiving is an all-alumni get-together. And a lot of us in my class start at the Dubliner. And I walked over to, there are a number of bars within the Dubliner. I walked over to one and started hearing screaming and cursing behind me and off to one side, sort of the other side of the small room I was in, and didn't take much note of it at first, but when I turned around to see, I could see Martin O'Malley, veins bulging from his neck, screaming and yelling, and like I said, cussing across the bar at me, and occasionally at me, some at the president. Occasionally he'd mention one policy or another. I love the kids in cages comment he made where I said, Martin, that was President Obama who bought those cages.
Right, but he said as a child of immigrants, you should be embarrassed and ashamed of yourself.
He brought up
the
my
media said he ran you out of there.
The
media said you turned tail and ran out the bar.
No, not at all. And classic media, I suppose. But I didn't leave there. He physically confronted me, and I walked by him. But there was. I found my classmates from Gonzaga in the Dubliner, and had my Guinness, and had another Guinness, and then went over to the smoker. So kind of juvenile behavior like Sarah Sanders suffered and Senator Cruz.
Yeah.
We're not succumbing to that. And this is a guy who thought he could be president.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when people start yelling and cursing and screaming in a bar, I get nervous. I get really, I get tense. I give you credit for being able to civilly, work it all out, because I don't know that all of these are going to end that way. They're getting too intrusive.
Well, Martin invited me to take a swing at him, and he didn't want it to end that way. And I told him, look, Martin, you're obviously not going to get any better at this. I'm gonna have to rise above this. And he didn't like being told that either.
Ken Cuccinelli,
that's the way it goes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Charles.
Hey, by the way, folks, we have reached out to former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley for comment, and we haven't heard back from him just yet.